Wolverine is one of the biggest superheroes in the world and has been for a very long time. This is a character with decades of comic book history, and Hugh Jackman played him to much love and fanfare for decades as well. Logan was treated like a swan song for that version of Wolverine. I guess Days of Future Past was a little bit too. And then Deadpool and Wolverine made the character have a massive theatrical comeback again, and yet, for a very long time, Wolverine didn't have any major standalone video games. The last one was actually X-Men Origins Wolverine in 2009, at least before the release of the Insomniac Marvel's Wolverine, and multiple console generations came and went, while meanwhile, one of Marvel's biggest characters was just kind of sitting on the sidelines. And that's a huge part of why I think Marvel's Wolverine actually matters. But before we talk about him a little more, I do want to know what superhero you think is long overdue for their own game. I ask this, a couple times a year, and I always get really interesting answers. How would you go about making their game too? Let me know what you're thinking. Now, before Marvel's Wolverine, the last major game for Wolverine as a solo game was X-Men Origins Wolverine. And this is a fantastic game in my opinion. I think it's so fun. It really breaks the mold when it comes to superhero movie tie-in games or just movie tie-in games in general. This version was tied to the Hugh Jackman version of Wolverine, and I think the Uncaged edition is the one a lot of people point to for being really interesting because it's extremely violent, it fits the character, and in general, Wolverine could actually tear enemies apart, impale them on things, his body would take visible damage and regenerate. I'd love to do just a full retrospective on this game at some point in general because the combat was super fun. I think this game is better received than the movie it was based off of, which is very uncommon. Now, I don't want to pretend X-Men Origins Wolverine is a flawless masterpiece. There are issues with the game, but it's super fun. And it was, of course, a Wolverine game. It wasn't just a game that featured Wolverine as a playable character. That was the focus here. And there are things that stood out about it that made it really interesting for people. But unfortunately, this game has become harder to access in recent years. And I personally think it's a very good case for both game preservation and emulation. Like, this is a game that was licensed, it used Hugh Jackman's face and his likeness, which adds a barrier to things. It's also a game that in general had a lot of Activision-isms around it, where Activision had these licenses to Marvel characters only for a limited time. It went away, then those games were delisted, and physical copies would become more expensive and be price gouged by people on the secondhand market. Now, does that make it impossible to play? Absolutely not. There are plenty of ways that old games can be preserved and played. Unfortunately, most of them are on the audience and people with technical know-how who do things like repackages, who distribute files through emulation, all this stuff. There are ways to enjoy it. But the strange thing is that for years, if somebody had become a Wolverine fan and asked me, or maybe even you, what Wolverine game they should go play, I'd be pointing them towards an old licensed game from 2009 that isn't really even sold anymore. What's weird about this is Wolverine never fell off or went away. In the comics, he was always a presence in both the X-Men comics and the standalone Wolverine titles, and has been for a very long time. There were alternate versions of Wolverine pushed there. Wolverine was appearing in other things as well. Hugh Jackman continued to play the character, even getting a comeback after Logan with a new version of Wolverine for Deadpool and Wolverine. You look at this character, and he's still been around. Wolverine has still been pushed. It's just very odd that during that whole time, nobody was pushing the gaming side of the character. Now, I know that there's some people who are going to say, hey, what are you talking about? Wolverine was still in certain games, like he was in this Lego game, or he was in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, or Midnight Suns, or a Marvel vs. Capcom. You're right, there are crossovers and appearances for him, but I think there's a huge difference between Wolverine being one character on a roster in a game full of characters, and an entire game focused around that character. In those games, Wolverine had to coexist mechanically and narratively with all these other people, but a standalone game can focus in on how does Wolverine himself move, because that's our focus. How should he fight? Because he's our one focus. How violent is his combat? And this is no shade, but it's not something like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 where you have Wolverine, but you're not having gore because it's Marvel vs. Capcom. This is something where you can focus on Wolverine as the entire structure. Now, the point isn't to turn this into a competition, but when you look at something like Batman with the Arkham games and Spider-Man where he would always get standalone games, it seems to me like there's all these superhero movies and a couple characters that would get a ton of games, but then there's characters like Wolverine who were huge and they absolutely could fit a game, but nothing happened with them. Even more bizarre is the fact that because Origins Wolverine already existed as a game, we knew this character worked. The healing factor, the adamantium claws, the senses, all of that, it worked in a video game. And because of all of his ensemble appearances in other games, we knew the character worked there too. This wasn't even something like Superman, where I think it could work, but people argue over and over that it can't. No, Wolverine was proven to work. He just basically got left alone. This is also why I'm glad that Marvel's Wolverine wasn't just repackaging Spider-Man. It's actually not just taking that formula and moving the same way. It's doing something with brutality, it's doing something with not being open world and actually focusing more on a narrative structure. It's even a game where the physical version of it matters, because I don't want to make this a negative video and I don't want to drag this point out, but we talked before about how this is a game where it is going to be disc-based before the PlayStation cutoff, despite being a PlayStation exclusive, and now they actually confirmed that the disc build is supposed to be playable from start to finish without requiring downloads at launch. I mean, we already got one Wolverine game that's not sold anymore and was a licensed piece, so I didn't really want that to happen again. I'm glad to see that this game is being preserved in a healthier way. I know these games weren't perfect, but I grew up in an era where a lot of superheroes did have their own games. Some of them were tie-in games and some of them were very mid, but in general, if you wanted to play an Iron Man game, you could go find one. If you wanted to play as Wolverine, yes, there were all those ensemble games, but you also had something like X-Men Origins Wolverine. And this was before it was mainly just Spider-Man and Batman as well. Like, Batman was starting to get games with things like Arkham Asylum, Spider-Man was still getting licensed games at the time based off of the films, but in general, there were different characters that were actually pitched and thrown into games at the time, much more than now. It's just crazy to me that for a huge portion of my life, that game, X-Men Origins Wolverine, remained the last major standalone Wolverine game that you could tell somebody, hey, you should go check that out and enjoy it. I'm glad that it seems like they're actually taking risks again on different characters, with Wolverine being one of them, because this is such an important and iconic character, not just for Marvel, but for superhero fans in general. And there's an entire era of gaming where he was kind of everywhere for ensembles, except at the center of his own title. And finally again, we get a game that's actually built around the character of Logan. Wolverine didn't need to just appear on another roster, he needed another game. That's why this is important, because it also opens the door, if it is successful, to seeing even more different characters, other than just Spider-Man and Batman, get a game that is actually focused specifically on them. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you want to leave a like, subscribe, those things help a ton. Huge thank you right here to our channel members. I appreciate you guys. I know it's been a little bit since I put one of these thank yous here, but thank you so much. We have played through a lot of superhero games as well over on Degenerate Plays, our other channel in the description down below in our link tree, and we have our own store, cosmobunny.shop, where you can support us. We make coasters, keychains, trays, and more, all made out of recycled paper from comics, manga, magazines, and other books that have been damaged, which we keep out of landfills by taking them, turning them into something new with resin for your home transformatively, and recycling the rest. And you can use code DJAY123 for 10% off over there. Appreciate you. You matter to us. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shui.